Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually we start these sessions by grounding ourselves in something tangible,
Hmm.
like a news event or a tech breakthrough, maybe a biography. But today,
It is very different.
yeah, today's different. I've been sitting with this stack of sources for, I don't know, about 3 days now, and I have to admit, it's been a little destabilizing.
Destabilizing is definitely the right word for this material, because we aren't looking at a specific subject today, we're actually looking at the mechanism of how we perceive subjects in the first place.
Right, exactly. We're talking about the architecture of reality itself,
Hmm.
or, well, more accurately, the architecture of the models we use to navigate reality.
Hmm.
And the core thesis across all these documents we're diving into today, and we've got a wide range here, from quantum physics to cognitive science, oral tradition, even some stuff on astrology.
Which I know we'll get to.
Right. Well, we will definitely get to the astrology part. But the overarching mission of this deep dive is to explore this idea that we are confused, like as a species.
Mm.
We're anxious and overwhelmed because we have fundamentally mistaken the map for the territory.
It's the oldest philosophical trap, really. But the sources today, they argue it has biological and structural roots. We don't just happen to make mistakes about reality. We actually construct a simplified reality in order to survive.
Yeah, and that leads us to the hook that, frankly, I'm still sort of wrestling with. The opening salvo in the primary text is, and I quote, "Physical law is an illusion."
Right.
Now, my immediate knee-jerk reaction to that is just total skepticism. It sounds like, dorm room philosophy. If physical law is an illusion, why can't I just walk through this table right now? Why does gravity work every single time I drop my keys?
It's a highly provocative statement, certainly, but we have to be very, very precise about what the source means by that word, illusion. Because it is not suggesting that the external world doesn't exist or that it lacks real consequences. I mean, if you walk full speed into a brick wall, you will break your nose.
Right, yeah.
That is a hard constraint of reality.
So the wall is real?
The resistance is real, the pain you feel is real, but your concept of the wall, this idea of a solid, static, continuous object that is governed by absolute final laws, that is a mental model.
A model.
It's a user interface. The source is arguing that our internalized version of physics is a closed, rigid system, whereas actual physics, the stuff happening at the quantum level, is wildly open. It's probabilistic and strange.
So the illusion isn't that the wall doesn't exist. The illusion is the feeling of finality, like the idea that we have the ultimate rule book and those rules are totally unchangeable.
Precisely. We confuse our simplified user interface with the actual machine code of the universe, and that confusion is where all the tension lies.
Let's unpack that a bit, because this idea, the illusion of finality, is really the first major pillar we need to get through. The source describes this fascinating process where, as we grow from children into adults, we stabilize our cognition.
Yes.
By adopting a rigid map. But why do we do that? I mean, if the world is actually open and wild and probabilistic, why do we build a brain that constantly tells us it's closed and static?
You have to think about the computational cost of living in a world without a map.
Okay.
When you are an infant, everything is just raw sensory data. It's light, sound, pressure. You don't actually know that the chair you're sitting on is separate from the floor.
What?
You don't know that objects persist when you close your eyes. It is a state of pure, unadulterated chaos.
Which sounds absolutely terrifying, honestly.
It's terrifying, and it's metabolically extremely expensive.
Yeah.
So to function, to be able to move or hunt or socialize, the human brain has to act as a prediction machine.
A prediction machine.
Exactly. This is broadly known in cognitive science as predictive processing. Your brain isn't just a passive camera taking in light. It's more like a dark room generating a simulation of what it expects to see, and then it just constantly checks for errors.
Wow, okay. So we essentially trade accuracy for speed.
We trade infinite resolution for a manageable JPEG, basically. We compress all that ambiguity. We decide, okay, gravity is an absolute, objects are totally solid, time moves in a straightforward line.
Because it's easier.
Because it regulates the nervous system, it creates a safe container. Imagine if you had to recalculate the mathematical probability of the floor holding your weight every single time you took a step. You'd be completely paralyzed.
That makes total sense from an evolutionary standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, you really don't want to be pondering quantum mechanics when a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you.
Exactly.
You want strict Newtonian determinism.
You want absolute rules in that moment. But here is the rub. We forget that we did the compressing in the first place. We look at our nice 720p streaming version of reality and we say, this is the absolute truth. We confuse a biological survival mechanism with the objective truth of the cosmos.
And that's exactly where the conflict with modern science comes in, isn't it? Because the source points out that while our brains are stuck in this Newtonian clockwork mindset, actual physics moved on, what, 100 years ago?
Right, over a century ago. If you talk to a quantum physicist today, they will tell you all about wave functions. They'll talk about probability clouds,
Yeah.
about quantum entanglement, where things influence each other across vast distances instantaneously. The universe, at its core, is open at the edges. It is simply not a closed mechanical machine.
But the physics inside the average person's head is a closed machine.
Exactly. We are walking around with 19th century software while trying to understand a 21st century universe.
Which leads to what I honestly think is the most beautiful insight in this first section, this total redefinition of the miracle.
Ah, yes, the anti-finality concept.
Because usually when we hear the word miracle, we think of a violation of nature, right?
Yeah.
We think of someone walking on water or a burning bush. We think of it as the universe somehow breaking its own rules.
But that definition assumes that our understanding of the rules is absolute and final.
Right.
If we accept that our understanding of the rules is just a simplified cognitive map, then a miracle isn't a violation of nature at all. It is simply a violation of your model of nature.
That is such a crucial shift for you to understand if you're listening. It takes the error or the anomaly and moves it from the universe to the observer.
Exactly. If your map explicitly says humans cannot do X, and then you see a human do X, you basically have a choice.
Yeah.
You can say that didn't happen and literally deny reality to protect your map. Or you can say, my map was incomplete. And the source calls this anti-finality. It's the profound realization that the territory is always, always larger than the map.
It reminds me of that classic Arthur C. Clarke quote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yes.
Because if you showed a smartphone to a medieval peasant, it would be an absolute miracle to them. Not because the iPhone breaks the laws of physics, but because it totally shatters the peasant's model of physics.
That's a perfect analogy. The source argues that what we call miracles are just encounters with the incompleteness of our own internal map. And this is exactly why miracles, or really any black swan event, anything totally unexpected, why they're so destabilizing.
Because they threaten the safe container.
Right. When a miracle happens, it doesn't just surprise us. It actually threatens our foundational sense of safety. It suggests that the walls of our little conceptual box aren't nearly as solid as we thought they were.
So the goal, at least according to this deep dive into the source material, isn't to reject science or logic. It's not about becoming anti-science. It's about embracing something they call holism.
Yes, holism. And holism here means holding the tension. It means being able to say, scientific laws are incredibly useful descriptions of reliable patterns, and I should definitely use them, but I should not mistake them for the total exhaustive sum of existence.
So we don't abandon physics.
No, we just abandon absolutism about physics.
It's a call for epistemic humility, just admitting that the universe is capable of things that our current textbooks haven't indexed yet.
And cultivating that humility opens the door to the next major section of the source material. Because if our internal map of physics is essentially a compression of reality, we have to ask, what other compression technologies have we developed throughout human history?
Right, which brings us to the oldest technology of all, the story.
The transition here is brilliant. We're moving from the hard sciences to what the author calls the architecture of narrative density.
I found this transition absolutely fascinating. We're looking at oral traditions, and the source leans heavily on the academic work of Walter Ong, specifically his book, Orality and Literacy.
Which is absolutely essential reading if you want to understand human consciousness. We have to really try to put ourselves in the shoes or sandals, I guess, of a primary oral culture.
Yeah, try to imagine a world with literally no writing, no external storage whatsoever.
No hard drives, no books, no printing press, not even a grocery list.
It's almost hard to even conceive of. I mean, if I don't write something down on my phone, it is gone from my brain in 10 minutes.
Exactly. In a primary oral culture, knowledge only exists if it is being actively recalled right now. If a society stops thinking about a complex idea and they haven't encoded it in a way that allows them to easily retrieve it later, it vanishes forever. It is permanently deleted from human history.
So the fundamental constraint of early humanity is storage space. The human brain is the only hard drive available.
And as you just pointed out, the human brain is a very leaky bucket.
Yeah.
So how do you plug the holes in the bucket? You use patterns, you use rhythm, you use narrative. The source argues that in oral traditions, a story wasn't just entertainment around the campfire.
Right.
It was mnemonic architecture. It was a rigorous structural system designed specifically to preserve critical data against the natural decay of human memory.
This is where we get into the story as technology concept. The idea that a myth or a folktale is effectively a cognitive zip file.
Yes. Consider the academic work of Milman Parry and Albert Lord, which our source cites heavily here. They studied the Homeric epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Right. And for centuries, scholars couldn't figure out how one single person could possibly memorize 15,000 lines of poetry.
The famous Homeric question, was Homer even one guy? How was this text preserved?
Well, Perry went to Serbia in the 1930s to study oral bards who were still singing these massively long epics. And what he found completely changed our understanding of literature.
Because they weren't memorizing it word for word, were they?
No, they weren't memorizing it like a modern actor memorizes a script. They were actually building the story on the fly out of prefabricated data blocks.
These are the formulas like the wine dark sea or rosy-fingered dawn.
Exactly. We modern readers look at those phrases and think they're just poetic flourishes. But they aren't. They are vital structural components.
Here, metric units. Yes, metric units that fit perfectly into the specific rhythm of the hexameter. The bard isn't up there thinking, gee, what's a pretty adjective for the ocean? He's thinking, I need a noun phrase that perfectly fits this specific rhythmic slot so the song doesn't collapse. And wine dark sea is the data block that fits that slot.
So the structure itself, the rhythm, the formulaic repetition, that is what sustains the memory. It acts like a scaffold for the data.
It is exactly a scaffold. But the source takes it even deeper than just words and rhythm. It argues that the characters themselves are forms of beta compression, that a character in an ancient myth actually encodes a function.
Okay, this part was a bit dense in the source. Can you give us a concrete example of a character encoding a function?
Sure. Let's look at the classic structure of tragedy. Take the story of Oedipus.
Okay, Oedipus Rex.
We tend to read it today as just a grim psychological story about a guy who unknowingly kills his dad and marries his mom. It's shocking, it's sad, Freud had a field day with it.
Right.
But structurally, what is that story actually storing for the culture?
It's storing a causal chain.
Yes. It is storing a high-fidelity simulation of hubris. Think about it. The king tries to outsmart a prophecy, which represents fate or the grand system. He uses his massive intellect to try to avoid his fate. But his very attempt to avoid it is the exact mechanism that causes the fate to happen.
Oh, wow.
The story encodes an incredibly complex sociological and psychological truth. It says, complex systems often behave counterintuitively, and trying to control a complex system with brute force intellect often triggers the exact catastrophic outcome you fear.
That is amazing. So instead of having some abstract, dry sociological textbook that explains the paradox of control in complex systems, which nobody would remember.
You have the story of Oedipus.
And the story is sticky. You remember Oedipus. You can visualize the tragedy. You might forget the abstract systems theory, but you won't forget the story.
Because the narrative acts as an embodied logic. It simulates the process. It allows the listener to run the simulation in their own head, experience the structural collapse of the character, and derive the wisdom without ever needing the abstract mathematical equation.
This connects directly back to the idea of the modern deficit that the source talks about.
Yeah.
Because we have gained literacy, we can write everything down. Now we have the internet, so we don't need these mnemonic tricks anymore. But in doing so, we've lost the ability to read the structural depth of these stories.
It's a profound loss. We have traded structural density for explicit precision.
Yeah.
So now a modern person reads an ancient myth and immediately asks, well, did this historically happen? What year did Oedipus rule? Where is the archaeological evidence for the Sphinx?
We're treating a zip file like it's a photograph.
Exactly. We are looking at raw code and complaining that it doesn't look like a pretty picture.
We've completely lost the software required to unzip the file.
Precisely. The source brings in Jerome Bruner here, who was a brilliant cognitive psychologist. He distinguished between two fundamentally different modes of thought: the paradigmatic mode, which is logic, science, and analysis, and the narrative mode of thought.
And we are totally obsessed with the paradigmatic today.
We are entirely trapped in the paradigmatic. We just want the literal facts. But oral cultures lived entirely in the narrative mode. They understood intuitively that truth could be encoded deeply into the structure of a story, even if the literal facts of the story were entirely made up.
So when we look back at ancient texts or religious scriptures or indigenous folklore, and we dismiss them as just being primitive or superstitious.
We are actually just displaying our own illiteracy. We
Well,
are failing to see the incredibly sophisticated technology at work. We are like a person who only speaks English looking at a beautiful Mandarin poem and concluding that it's just random, primitive ink squiggles because we can't read it.
the deficit is ours, not theirs.
Mhm.
Okay, so this idea of mapping reality through structure, it brings us to the third section of the source material. And I suspect this is going to be the hardest sell for a lot of you listening, because we have to talk about astrology.
Ah, I can hear the collective intake of breath through the microphone.
I know, I know. When I first saw astrology in the outline for this material, I thought, okay, are we really pivoting to horoscopes right now? Are we going to talk about why Leos shouldn't date Scorpios?
Right.
But the source actually takes a completely different, highly structural angle on this.
It does. And I want to be very, very clear right up front so we don't lose anyone. The source is not validating pop astrology.
Good.
It is not saying that the literal gravitational pull of Mars determines whether you get a promotion at work on a Tuesday.
Okay, so what is it saying? Because it spent a lot of time on this.
It's looking at astrology strictly as a system of structural mapping. We have to ask ourselves a historical question. Why did human beings across almost every isolated culture on Earth obsessively map the stars and try to relate them to events down here on Earth?
Well, practically speaking, because the sky was the only reliable clock they had.
Correct. The sky is the ultimate macro system. It is perfectly orderly, it is cyclic, and it is massive. Meanwhile, life down here on Earth, the microsystem is chaotic, it's messy, it's totally uncertain.
Yeah.
So the fundamental insight of astrology, and really of all ancient cosmology, is this concept of isomorphism.
Isomorphism, meaning same form.
It's the idea that patterns repeat at different scales. The classic esoteric phrase is as above, so below. And the source argues that this isn't magic, it's actually early systems theory.
Okay, can you explain that connection a bit more? How is as above, so below related to systems theory?
Think about a fractal.
Okay.
Think about the shape of a coastline. If you view a coastline from a satellite in space, it has a specific, jagged, irregular shape. Now, if you zoom in to just 100 meters above the beach, the rocks have that exact same jagged, irregular shape. And if you zoom all the way into the microscopic level, the molecules are forming similar jagged crystals. The pattern holds true across entirely different scales of reality.
So the ancients looked up at the sky and thought, hey, if there is a predictable cycle up there, a season for planting, a season for harvest, a time of increasing light, a time of darkness, maybe there is a similar underlying cycle happening inside human affairs.
Exactly. They were trying to map time itself. Modern people, we tend to think of time as purely linear. It's just a straight line of one damn thing happening after another.
Just a ticking clock.
But ancient cultures saw time as qualitative. There were actual types of time. For example, there is a time for expansion and growth, which they mapped to Jupiter. There is a time for restriction and boundary setting, mapped to Saturn. A time for aggression and conflict, mapped to Mars.
So in this view, astrology was essentially a massive dashboard. It was an early data visualization tool to track which part of the cycle we are currently experiencing.
Yes, it was a compression tool. Just like the myth compresses sociological wisdom into a character, astrology compresses the overwhelming complexity of time into manageable archetypes.
Right.
If you know you're heading into a Saturn phase of your life, a phase of restriction, discipline, and structure, you prepare and behave very differently than if you were in a Jupiter phase of luck and expansion. It gives you a cognitive map for the invisible terrain of time.
And the source connects this back to narrative structures too, doesn't it? This concept of narrative diets.
Yes, it all ties together beautifully. Just as the planets have predictable orbits, human stories have orbits. We see the exact same patterns recur over and over across history.
Like the exile leading to wandering.
Exactly. Exile leads to wandering. Wandering eventually leads to a moment of insight, and insight leads to the return. And the source points out that this isn't happening because there is some secret committee in Hollywood writing all the scripts.
Right, it's not some grand global conspiracy.
It's a recurring structural constraint. Think about it. All humans are born, we all struggle, we all have to learn, and we all eventually die. The shape of a human life has shared biological and environmental constraints. Therefore, the shape of our stories and the shape of our astrological archetypes naturally reflects that underlying reality.
This brings up that specific aha moment the source describes. Because when you start thinking this way, when you finally move your mind from obsessing over linear facts to recognizing these structural patterns, the whole world starts to look very, very different.
It feels incredibly revelatory. The source describes it as the moment the scaffolding of reality suddenly becomes visible to you. You stop looking at the chaotic surface events on the evening news or even the drama in your personal life, and you start seeing the underlying structural currents.
You start saying, oh, this isn't just a random, unprecedented political scandal. This is literally just the collapse of hubris cycle playing out again, exactly like Oedipus.
Yes, it turns noise into signal. And that, fundamentally, is the ultimate goal of any good model.
But this visibility, this ability to actually see the scaffolding, it isn't evenly distributed, is it? Some people see it and some people just don't. And this leads us perfectly into the fourth section of the source, the interpretive threshold. Or, to put it more sexually, secrets.
Secrets is definitely a loaded word. We usually think of secrets as information that is actively being hidden from us.
Right, like a password.
Mm.
Or a classified document locked in a safe. Or the location of the Holy Grail.
But the source argues that the most profound and important secrets in the world aren't hidden in that physical way at all.
It uses this amazing analogy of the calculus textbook.
It's a great thought experiment. Imagine you walk into a normal public library, and there's a textbook on advanced multivariable calculus just sitting right there on the shelf.
Right.
Is the book hidden? No. Is it locked inside a vault? No. You can walk right up to it, pick it up, and open it.
But if I personally don't know calculus, the book is completely gibberish to me. I see the symbols on the page, I see the numbers and the Greek letters, but I extract absolutely zero meaning from it.
Because the information is publicly available, but it is structurally inaccessible to you. The secret protects itself. It doesn't need walls or guards. It is protected by the strict requirement of literacy.
This is such a powerful reframe when you apply it to things like secret societies. You know, the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the ancient Gnostics. We tend to think they're sitting in a dark room hiding the capital T truth in a locked box.
But if you actually look at the history of these esoteric groups, their secrets are rarely just factual data points.
Yeah?
They are usually methods of interpretation. They're pedagogical systems. When you join one, you undergo a ritual, you slowly learn a new symbol system, you practice a specific mode of thought, and slowly, over years, you build the interpretive apparatus required to read the metaphorical book of nature.
So the real secret isn't a piece of trivia. The secret is a threshold shift inside the student.
Exactly. You have to literally change who you are and how your brain processes data in order to receive the information. The source phrases it beautifully. It says, an illusion is not a fake reality. It is a misinterpretation of structure.
A misinterpretation of structure.
To dispel the illusion, you don't need someone to hand you new facts. You need to develop a new lens.
This makes me think of learning a foreign language. Like, before you know French, listening to a conversation in French is just pure noise. It's just phonetic sounds. But after you spend years learning French, suddenly it's rich meaning. The sound waves in the air didn't change at all. You changed.
And this principle applies to absolutely everything we've discussed today. The fundamental physics of the world didn't change. Our cognitive model changed.
Right.
The ancient story didn't change. Our ability to unzip its structural meaning changed. The stars in the sky didn't change. Our recognition of the isomorphic pattern changed. It is all, always, about the sophistication of the receiver.
So we've built up this really massive layered picture here. We have physics as a cognitive map, we have stories as mnemonic zip files, we have astrology as a qualitative dashboard for time, and we have secrets as literacy tests.
Yes.
Now we have to pull all of this together into the final, really mind-bending concept of Section 5, which the source calls recursive isomorphism.
This is the grand synthesis of the entire document, and it centers on a philosophical concept called the no outside rule.
The no outside rule.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the part that really borders on the existential edge for me.
It directly challenges the fundamental subject-object split that we base our entire lives on. We traditionally think, okay, here I am inside my head, I am the subject, and out there, completely separate from me, is the world, the object.
Right. I am the camera, and the world is the landscape I'm taking a picture of.
The source argues that this model is fundamentally false because you can never, ever step outside of your own modeling apparatus. Everything you experience, the laws of physics, your deepest emotions, the colors you see, your profound spiritual insights, every single bit of it is occurring entirely within the model that your brain is currently generating.
So there's no access to a naked reality. There is only modeled reality.
Exactly. Physics is a model. The ego, your very sense of being you, is a model. Even your fundamental perception of space and time is a model. You cannot access the Ding and sich concept of the thing in itself without passing it through the filter of your human consciousness.
Okay, but this is exactly where I have to push back a little bit, because this sounds dangerously close to pure solipsism.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, yeah. If I can't access anything outside of my own internal model, how do I know anything else actually exists at all? How do I know I'm not just a brain in a jar hallucinating this entire conversation with you right now?
That is the terrifying precipice of this philosophy, but the source explicitly pulls us back from that edge using the concept of recursive isomorphism. And the key term here is shared constraints.
Shared constraints? Okay, explain how that saves us from solipsism.
If you were just a brain in a jar hallucinating all of this, you could just change the rules. You could decide to float out of your chair right now. You could decide that putting your hand in a fire feels like cool ice.
But I can't.
You can't, because the world pushes back.
The resistance we talked about in the very beginning. The brick wall.
Exactly. The wall. The profound fact that we all encounter the exact same gravity, the same mathematical laws, the same biological cycles of aging and death, this proves that while we are indeed trapped inside our models, those models are responding to a real structured something that exists out there.
We are navigating a shared territory, even if we are all using our own internal maps.
Yes. So we aren't creating reality out of nothing, but we are co-constructing our experience of it. Subject and object arise together simultaneously.
Okay, I see.
You don't exist without a world to perceive, and the world, at least as you can ever possibly know it, doesn't exist without you to perceive it. It is an inseparable dance.
This circles us all the way back to the very first sentence of the deep dive. Physical law is an illusion.
Yes, and now we finally understand the full weight of that sentence. It does not mean nothing is real, jump off a building.
Right.
It means physical law is just the name we humans give to the pattern we currently perceive. It is the map. And the map is never, ever the territory.
The source calls reality structured relational patterning. It's not a collection of isolated things. It's an infinite web of relationships.
And that is a recursive pattern. The relationship between microscopic atoms mirrors the relationship between individual people, which mirrors the relationship between giant planets, which mirrors the relationship between the structural parts of an ancient story.
It's all the exact same code running on different hardware.
Recursive isomorphism. The exact same shape, repeating infinitely up and down the scale of existence. That is the core, breathtaking insight of this material.
It's a lot to process.
It is a lot. It requires a complete, fundamental overhaul of how we typically navigate our day-to-day lives.
So, as we start to bring this in for a landing, I have to ask the practical question. The so what of it all. We've just spent all this time completely deconstructing reality.
Yeah.
How does understanding this actually help you, the listener, who has to wake up, go to work tomorrow, raise your kids, and deal with the overwhelming stress of modern life?
I think this shift in perspective offers two incredibly practical daily tools: resilience and wonder.
Let's start with resilience. How does this make us more resilient?
If you rigidly believe that your mental map is the absolute final truth of the universe, then every single time reality contradicts your map, you suffer deeply.
Yeah.
You feel personally betrayed. You say, this shouldn't be happening. This isn't fair. This breaks all the rules. And you emotionally shatter.
Because your rigid model literally cannot handle the anomaly.
Exactly. But if you hold your map loosely, if you truly accept that it's just a temporary, simplified model, then when things go wrong or when the unexpected happens, you don't panic.
You just adapt.
You adapt. You say, the territory is surprising me today. My map simply needs an update. You become fluid. You stop fighting the massive flow of reality and you finally start navigating it.
That's incredibly freeing. And what about wonder?
Well, if the map is just a simplified, low-resolution sketch, that means the actual territory is always infinitely richer, deeper, and wilder than you can possibly know.
The world is never actually solved.
Never. You can look at a seemingly boring tree in your backyard, or a difficult person in your life, or the starry sky and realize, I am only seeing a tiny, compressed fraction of what is actually there.
It totally re-enchants the world.
It invites you to keep looking, to keep decoding the patterns, to keep learning the secrets. It completely cures the boredom of the known world because you realize that absolutely nothing is truly fully known.
Man, that is a beautiful place to land. But before we completely sign off, I do want to leave you with one final, very provocative thought from the source material. It speculates about where human cognition is going next.
Ah, yes. The AI connection. This part is absolutely fascinating.
Right, because we talked about the era of orality, where memory was everything.
Yeah.
Then we moved into the era of literacy, where we wrote it all down. And now we are fully in the digital age.
Yes.
And the source suggests that new tools like large language models, the AIs that we are all interacting with right now, might strangely be a massive return to the ancient principles of oral tradition.
It sounds crazy at first, but think about it. When you use a traditional search engine like Google, you are looking for a specific fixed literate document. You want the exact text that someone wrote.
Right, you want the physical page.
But when you talk to an advanced AI, you are asking for a fluid synthesis. You are engaging in an active dialogue. The AI has ingested the entire massive corpus of human text, basically the whole internet, and it has compressed all of that data into a neural network.
It's essentially a massive zip file.
It is the ultimate mnemonic zip file. And when we query it, we aren't retrieving a static printed page.
Yeah.
We are generating a highly dynamic, customized response based purely on underlying patterns.
It's probabilistic.
Exactly. It's probabilistic. And it's even hallucinatory in the exact same way that human memory is hallucinatory.
So we are actually moving away from the fixed text mindset of the printing press era, and we're moving back into a fluid, conversational, pattern-based relationship with human knowledge.
We might literally be building a global structural simulation engine that rivals the old oral traditions of the ancient bards. We are externalizing the storyteller.
That is both incredibly exciting and, honestly, slightly terrifying.
As all good deep dives should be.
Haha, fair enough.
Oh.
Well, on that note, we are going to wrap this up. This has been a really heavy one. We've covered physics, ancient myths, the stars, secret societies, and the very structure of human consciousness itself. I really hope you didn't drop your coffee while listening to this, but I do hope you're looking at your coffee cup a little bit differently now.
Just remember the cup is a model.
Don't start that again. We're out of time. Thank you all so much for taking this deep dive with us. Keep updating your maps, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.